Sterling, Virginia. You're on.
Good morning.
Hi.
This is really just mind-boggling. I mean, President Obama has been in office less than a week, and he's already weakened our country. And, you know, I really think this is just an appeasement to the radical left of this country. And the problem is these are not warriors, these are not fighters, these are terrorists. And it's an ideology these people are fighting under. And the only countries that will take them are the ones that have the same mindset as they do. And if we keep going down this road and putting them in our country, do we really think that somebody's not going to slip through the cracks? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think, you know, the liberals in this country want a utopia where everybody gets along. That's not reality. We live in a country right now, we live in a world where these people want to destroy the civilization and the way we live. That's a bottom line. That's a fact.
Michelle McClure.
Well, I must disagree that it's just the liberals who want Guantanamo closed. There have been a number of sources that said that Secretary Gates, as long as 2 years ago when he took his position, was interested in closing Guantanamo. I've heard other reports that individuals, even before that, within the Pentagon, prepared plans for closing Guantanamo. I think that whether we close Guantanamo is not the real issue. I think the issue becomes, what do we do with these individuals? And certainly one of the problems that faces the Obama administration is, what do we do? And how do we ensure the safety of the American public as well as the rest of the world, and also stick by laws that we've passed and that we've adhered to in the past?
Upper Marlboro, Maryland, Democrat.
Hi, good morning. First, let me thank you for C-SPAN and taking my call. First of all, I'd like to say I totally agree with the JAG officer, or the former JAG officer. Please indulge me for one moment. I'm a little nervous. But I want to say thank God for our founders, for the wisdom of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. It is just in these tough times when we must adhere to the Constitution of the United States. This is a nation of laws. Now, just suppose we didn't have the great Constitution that we have today. This place would be in chaos with all this fear, just like the gentleman from my neighboring state over there in Virginia just called in. It's just fear. They're just putting fear into people. And finally, if you'll indulge me for one more moment, Gandhi once wrote that there are 7 sins in the world: wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, and politics without principle.
Michelle McClure.
Well, I agree with you, caller. Without the Constitution, we wouldn't have had the very orderly change of administrations that we saw on Tuesday. And it's remarkable when you see other parts of the world and the way they change their political administrations, especially when you change from one party to another in some parts of the world. So we're very thankful for the wisdom of our founding fathers. And
in your view, Michelle McClure, was Guantanamo wrong from the beginning?
I don't know that it was wrong from the beginning. Guantanamo in itself, we had to have a place to detain individuals. What it evolved into and the public relations nightmare that it became was basically it became associated as pretty much a continuation of the atrocities at Abu Ghraib. And I think that's where the problem came in, is that not the fact necessarily that we were detaining individuals, especially if we did have good reason to believe that they had done terrorist activities, but the treatment that became associated with Guantanamo, and the fact that the trials have taken so long to happen. I don't think from the beginning anyone envisioned, well, maybe some people envisioned, but that it was going to end up that we're 6-7 years down the line and we still have only had 3 trials be completed.
Next call for Michelle McClure comes from Houston, Independent Line. You're on.
Well, as usual, with the other callers, I want to say thank you for C-SPAN. You guys keep this pretty clear. I'll lead this in and leave it with you to feedback, but I want to pick up on what the last caller said about putting principle first, that when we give up our principles, there's a few things that happen that are consequential. One, a lot of other countries can also begin to reduce their standards as well, because if the United States can do it, well, then we can do it too, would be their setup. And I think that I keep hearing opinion of all sorts of positions about torture and detainees, but none of it seems to reflect the actual already written statutes, law, international law, U.S. law. And it seems to be if we removed the hyperbole going on, we'd have about 5% of this conversation going. And so let me ask you it so you can give me some feedback. What U.S. and international laws are we actually obligated to, number one? And I recently read that Manfred Nowak, who's the UN investigator, has already started to pursue a case against Bush and Rumsfeld for the detainee treatment and torture. So it really, in some ways, it won't even matter what we do. I mean, we're supposed to be the good guys here, but, you know, I want a reflection between the opinions that you hear and what the actual law says, regardless of our opinions, and I'll leave it to that.
Well, and that's one thing that with the executive orders released yesterday that has changed, because in the past, the administration had determined that these individuals were enemy combatants that we're talking about here today, and that they weren't subject to or entitled to the protections of prisoners of war under the Geneva Conventions. But with the executive orders that were released yesterday, it's clear that the Geneva Conventions apply, that humane treatment of the detainees is a requirement now, that we're required, and this includes the military individuals and the other agencies and departments that may be interrogating individuals, to follow the Army Field Manual, which in the past wasn't necessarily the standard, and that the CIA is not to have continued secret detainee facilities, that the Red Cross is going to be allowed to have access to all the detainees, which at some points in the past was not allowed. So definitely the laws change, and that's something that President Obama has made obviously a top priority, because he made these executive decisions within the first 48 hours of his presidency. So look for the United States to be following different international as well as U.S. laws in the future in this area.
Defiance, Ohio, Republican.
Yes, ma'am. I am just absolutely astounded, and I'm not trying to be rude, but at the ignorance of some of the previous callers. In answer to the question that was put by the last caller, under the Mendez decision of the United States Supreme Court that was passed recently, it clearly stated that unless the U.S. Congress has enacted portions of the treaty or the agreement, or all of the treaty or the agreement, into U.S. law, then it cannot, I repeat, cannot be used as a defense, nor can it be used in any sort of a trial. And the second thing is with these executive decisions, and I blast both Reagan and Carter and all the other ones who've done this, under Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution, it clearly states that the only people who have the authority to make a law or give something the weight of law is the U.S. Congress. Therefore, all executive orders or presidential directives are illegal and have been since the U.S. Constitution was put into effect. You can smile all you want, but it's there. And
Michelle McClure.
Well, and the problem, caller, is that be they, non-binding or whatever you want to call it, the executive orders are in place. They've been followed for decades now, and the military is bound, and as well as all the other executive agencies, are bound to follow their civilian leadership, in this case, President Obama. So as much as we like to debate, whether they would hold up in court or anything along those lines, the fact of the matter is, if the president says this is my decision, this is what I say in my order, the agencies are bound to follow that.
Michelle McClure, the New York Times reports this morning that most of the remaining 245 detainees are Yemenis. Any reason for that?
I don't know why it is that most of the individuals left are from Yemen. I'm not sure if there's any specific reason for that or it just happens to be that way.
And Senator DeMint from South Carolina says this morning that some detainees, if this process is followed through, might end up in the Charleston Naval Brig, and he is opposed to that.
Right. Well, and the representatives and congressmen from Kansas are opposed to Leavenworth being the detainee resting point as well. And I guess Charleston, because it does have maximum security facilities, which is one of the problems with closing Guantanamo, is they built special facilities at Guantanamo for these detainees. It's going to take time to build new facilities. Hopefully they would be smaller because we don't have 800 individuals down there. The new facility wouldn't need to hold nearly as many unless we pick up many more on battlefields in the future. But Charleston is where Ali al-Mari, the only so-called terrorist who's been held on American soil, that's where he currently resides. And so I guess that's one of the reasons that they've mentioned Charleston. I've also heard that perhaps one of the Camp Pendleton brigs in California could be used. It's going to be interesting because, of course, everyone wants Guantanamo closed, but nobody wants 245 detainees who may be terrorists in their backyards.
Last call from Michelle McClure of the National Institute of Military Justice, Baltimore Democrat.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, now I can't, as far as everything, see where you're totally coming from, Michelle, because first you misstated your facts about whether the tactics graduated from Abu Ghraib to Guantanamo. In actuality, the history of it is that the tactics went out from Guantanamo to Abu Ghraib. And when the host asked you earlier if, Guantanamo was correct to be set up from the beginning, you said you didn't know. The actual purpose to set up Guantanamo explicitly was for it to be outside of the law. Last point, the thing about creating a Jack Bauer exception. Jack Bauer is a fictional character, so that's kind of like setting up a Mike Tyson exception for biting people's ears off. I think the whole conversation, if we need to wonder where we can take these people, send them to The Hague and try them in The Hague or something. That's within international law, and America has to follow international law because we signed it, and we should be obeying it. Thank you.
Well, and I'm not saying that Guantanamo didn't exist until after Abu Ghraib. I'm saying that the public relations issues that arose came mainly after Abu Ghraib. So I want to set that straight. And as far as Guantanamo being set up as a place outside the United States, that's true. I mean, there's a reason that the individuals were not sent to the United States. Well, a number of reasons actually, but one of them certainly was because by all precedents that anyone could rely on, individuals held outside the United States, prisoners of war or other sorts of detainees, didn't have the rights of United States citizens. And as far as the Jack Bauer exception, I never mentioned Jack Bauer, but
that caller was referring to the editorial in the Wall Street Journal this morning, so about torture. So, Michelle McClure is with the National Institute of Military Justice, former JAG with the Air Force. Thank you for being on the Washington Journal this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And that will kind of end our conversation about Guantanamo Bay, the full first hour this morning.